Welcome to Gatecrashers, a podcast dedicated to kicking open the door to your next favorite thing. Our mission, our creed, and our code is this: to make all things more approachable and accessible to everyone. We want you to find a universe that you'll fall in love with. My name is Dan. My pronouns are he, him.
My name is Reagan. My pronouns are she, they.
And today, we actually have a special guest. Reagan, do you want to tell us a little bit about them?
Brian Wecht is a man of many talents. He's worn many hats over the years, having worked as a theoretical physicist, a time during which he held research positions at institutes such as Harvard, MIT, and Queen Mary University of London. Brian has also been performing as a member of Ninja Sex Party and Starbomb as Ninja Brian, as well as having had a kids band called Go Banana Go. Currently, Brian can be also be found as the co-host of Late Night with Brian Wecht, a podcast for the terminally online.
Beautiful. Brian, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
I'm very excited that you're here. Reagan is reading off of these cue cards that they wrote everything down on. I really wish you put it on like a big scroll, because I don't think we've had anybody who's had so many different names and you just like pulled it out. For an audio medium, though, it would only be funny for us three.
But you'd have to handwrite it in calligraphy. Yeah. Right? Like, you couldn't just have a scroll with it, like, printed out.
Use my grade 2 cursive lessons for
Yeah,
once.
exactly.
You open it up.
I'm impressed you learned cursive. Like, no one learns cursive anymore.
I had a teacher who was, like, right on that.
Right on the, yeah.
Yeah. I would have been the last, one of the last groups to do that, though.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw something going around online recently where I can't remember exactly what it was. It was some screenshot for something, and there was a cursive note, and people were like, "How can anyone read this?" I was like, "I guess this is just a generational thing now." I mean, when I was growing up, everyone learned cursive.
Yeah.
In fact, I was told in school, every essay you write, like whenever you're writing on a test, you have to write in cursive. It's required, which sucked. But
my teacher,
whatever.
As I was growing up, like, it was like right in the middle, like we were still learning cursive, but like computers became more and more like abundant in life. So like they were telling us that we were going to have to write everything in high school on like cursive and things like that. And just everyone had a computer and you just did it that way. Yeah. So it was nice to be in the transition point. So Brian, I don't know how much you know about us here at Gatecrashers, but we're actually known as pretty hard-hitting journalists.
Of course.
People know we're very serious and everything we do has kind of a punch to it. So we always start our interviews off with something pretty heavy.
Please.
So I hope you're ready.
I'm not.
What's your favorite? What's your favorite sandwich?
My favorite sandwich. I was actually oddly, I was just thinking about this the other day. I like. Okay, I'm going to say prosciutto, mozzarella, basil, little bit of olive oil on a ciabatta.
That's an incredible
Maybe
sandwich.
throw some roasted red peppers on there too.
That actually leads to the first question, because as a fellow nerd who grew up in New Jersey, when you're creating music and projects that you work on, do you hope that they find those types of kids that you were going through similar situations?
Oh, sure. I mean, yes, because like, I mean, if I'm writing for anyone, I'm writing for myself. So, I definitely am writing for myself at all ages, kind of. So for sure, I hope that what I write and what I do connects with people, who are like what I was and beyond, right? The goal is to be something that a lot of different people can enjoy. But of course, I have my own background and everything I do kind of brings that with it. So I think in some sense we all create for ourselves no matter what we do, right?
Yeah. And I want to follow up on that, because when you're creating, are you thinking of the end point? Like, when you started doing this, was it you wanted to do this because this made you happy? Or were you like, oh, I'd love to be successful from this?
I mean, do you have a this specifically in mind when you say this?
Yeah, let's say Ninja Sex Party, like writing the music that's out there.
And sorry, and the question was, am I doing it with an endpoint in mind, or
are you creating to create for you, or are you creating to be able to sell it to others?
Oh, I mean, it is a combination, of course, but ultimately with kind of everything I do, it's whatever makes, and with NSP, say me and Danny and our producer Jim Roach, whatever makes us laugh is what we want to do. And we will often, there's some filters there too, where it's like, okay, that's really funny. Maybe that's a little over a line we don't want to cross with this particular project. So with NSP, for example, the way we think about NSP has a lot of like sex jokes and stuff, right? But the way we think about it is they're very adolescent. It's like, the way I think about it personally, it's like what a 12-year-old understands about sex, which is, it's a thing that exists. You've heard of it. You've probably heard people talk about it, but you don't really know what it is. It's this kind of like very immature version of that. So we don't want to do anything that would be like real porny. Generally speaking, you can find counterexamples to this, I'm sure, in the stuff we've done. But, every what I'm trying to say is every project has its own lens. Mm-hmm. And sometimes the stuff that makes us laugh the hardest isn't appropriate for what we want that particular thing to be. So with NSP, it might be like, okay, that's a funny sex joke, but that's like that's too gross for what this band is. We're not, for example, Steel Panther.
Yes. It was actually Michael Starr did a track on the new Peacemaker, and I was like, "Holy shit, is this Steel Panther?"
Yeah.
But with your art, you said you have different lenses. What do you think is the most personal project that you've put out?
Excuse me. Probably the podcast, right? Because I'm just, that's just like unfiltered talking for several hours. So that's, if there's anything that's, most me, it's that.
And with a lot of the stuff you do being comedic, what is the earliest moment you can kind of remember that you wanted to make other people laugh? Like, was this something that you wanted to do as a career, or just something you enjoyed and wanted to pursue further?
That's a good question. I was always into comedy. I mean, I loved Weird Al and stand-ups growing up. When did I want to make people laugh? I mean, I remember writing stuff in high school that was intentionally comedic. I guess the first thing that occurs to me, I was probably parroting Monty Python sketches when I was like 13 or something like that. I remember I had a writing assignment in 9th grade for a humanities thing. We had to write like a lost chapter of Catcher in the Rye. That was the assignment. Like, write a chapter of this book that doesn't exist. And I remember being like, okay, I'm going to write something funny. And then, that's the first time I can remember like sitting down to write something and being like, okay, this is going to be a comedic thing. Let's do it. But, well, yeah.
I'm very thankful for Catcher in the Rye. At least one person was inspired in a good way by that book.
Exactly. I can't say I'm fond of it at all. Even then, I never saw the appeal.
We've gotten to interview a lot of funny people, but you're the first person who has brought up Weird Al. Do you think his influence has kind of built out the comedy music scene?
Oh, yeah. I mean, he is, without a doubt, the preeminent comedy musician of the last 40 years, probably. Like, you don't have comedy music today without Weird Al. He's a huge influence on lots of people and has been for a long time. So he's not, one of these guys that like put out a good album in the 80s and just kind of coasted. He's been consistently productive and funny since the late 70s. I think he's such a huge influence on many, many people and the whole scene. I just don't think you have modern comedy music without Al Yankovic.
So for you, with the comedy and performing and things like that, what is the hardest part of performing live comedy?
Oh, it's not pissing off the other people on stage too much. Like, my character tends to be a bit aggressive and, like, intentionally annoying. And so I always try to find that line where it's funny and not just, like, Brian, come on, stop. I have a friend, a dear friend from college who comes to a lot of NSP shows, and he's like, I can always find the one, every time I'm watching you guys play, I look for the one moment where Danny actually gets mad at you, and it always happens. And so that's the biggest challenge is like, trying to be funny while not being a complete a-hole.
And you brought it up, but like the music, doing this is like a collaborative process with a band. Do you prefer to do like that? Like, do you prefer to riff off one another, or do songs and different ideas come to you and then you bring them to each other and then you go back and forth to refine them?
It's very collaborative. Yeah. Like when we're writing, it's really typically when we write. So musically instrumentally, that's me and producer Jim Roach. And it's just constantly ping ponging ideas. Hey, what about this? Hey, what about this? Like it's very collaborative. And then when Danny usually joins once we have kind of the music locked down, the instrument stuff locked down, and then it's very collaborative on lyrics and vocal melodies. Usually, like the vocal melody stuff is Danny and Jim. The lyrics are all three of us, and the instrumental stuff is me and Jim.
Now, before we get into a different type of topic, I did want to ask when you picked up music. Like, when did you start playing instruments and things like that? And what was your go-to song to impress people?
Did I impress anyone? I started piano around 6 or 7. And then, recorder in 3rd grade, like many people. I think Beautiful. They still do that. And then we got to pick a real instrument in 4th grade. And then I picked sax, and then just kind of accumulated instruments from there. And it's so long, like you have to be playing for a while before you can impress anybody. So I don't think I had anything specific like that. Yeah.
Now, onto a very different topic for you. Being that, you're kind of like a genius who writes papers on supersymmetric quantum field theory and string theory. You also do a lot of public speaking on the subjects, including at conferences, one of which the Northeast Conference on Science and Skepticism, which you actually help organize. Do you approach these speaking engagements with a different mindset that you would going on stage for a comedy show?
Yeah. I mean, I do want to, first of all, thank you for saying genius, but it really is just like a thing I spent a lot of time doing, like it's kind of just like learning another language with physics. I certainly do not think of myself as a genius at all. I just like found a thing interesting and learned a lot about it. But for the speaking, yeah, it's a very, there are similarities, right? Whenever you're giving a talk, you want to be engaging. I do want to be funny, although I have found that typically rehearsed jokes don't work in science talks. They always seem really, I don't know, just they seem very forced. I've seen a lot of speakers giving science talks who put in canned jokes, and you can just feel the air fall out of the room. Some people are good at it. I always kind of just let, just if there was an opportunity to say something amusing, I'd say it. But also, you're not doing a comedy bit, like, I mean, there are some science comedians out there, of course, but, I don't view my talks as comedic. It's just like, hey, if I have an opportunity to say something funny, I might take it. But, the commonalities are you want to be a focal point and engaging and tell an interesting story. So yeah, like I love talking about science to the public.
Now, do you think the confidence to speak for science draws from a different well in you than something like comedy?
Yeah.
Like you.
Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. What's your drive on those?
Well, so with comedy, I mean, ultimately, you are the arbiter of what you think is funny. There's no right or wrong. It's like, I think this is funny. In science, you can just be wrong. And if you don't know what you're saying, it's very like, I've been a young grad student giving talks where you're not totally confident about what you're saying. If you get called out or someone asks you a hard question about something and you don't really know it, it's a horrible feeling because you can just be like, I read it in a paper. It's like, it's really scary to be up there and feel like you have weak points. Everyone has weak points. You're just praying that, there's not someone in the audience who's going to call you out on them. So with science, the confidence comes from expertise, really, and just being like having thought about something. If you're giving a research talk, people might ask you hard questions about stuff you don't know or haven't thought about yet. Hopefully they're not pointing out, a fatal flaw in your paper or something, which does happen from time to time. But generally that confidence comes from being an expert and having thought about this particular topic, for, months, years, whatever it is. With comedy, I mean, everyone's an expert on their own comedy. So you just walk up and, I think with comedy, it's more just general self-confidence that, what you're doing is funny. And even if the audience isn't laughing, well, okay, it's just not for them. And maybe there's someone out there that'll respond to it. Any comedian will tell you that different rooms bring different energies. You can perform the same material in exactly the same way to two different groups. And with one, it'll crush, and the other, you could hear a pin drop. So there, it's just self-confidence about, oh, this is funny. So I'm saying one is backed by actual knowledge, and the other is just like, I believe in myself.
Yeah. One's concrete, and one's just like, I'm going to go for it.
Yeah, that's right. And you know what? If I'm wrong, but whatever. And the other thing is you might not find that funny in a week, a month, a year, whatever. You might look back on it, a little bit later in your life and be like, what was I thinking? I hate that now. Yeah, that happens.
Was there ever any fear that your two lives would affect one another?
Yeah.
I
was worried because when I started really performing as a comedian, I was in grad school, but once the only thing I did that really started, getting people to notice stuff was NSP. And then once NSP, by the time NSP became kind of popular, I was already a professor. And so I was worried. Actually, I was worried when I was looking for faculty jobs that I would get a job and then have some student that was horrified I was in this weird sex band, which is not out. All you need is some kind of conservative person without much of a sense of humor, or to be more charitable, a person who thinks it's not appropriate for, a faculty member to be doing that kind of stuff. That could be in admin or something. I was scared that if I got a faculty job, I would have some student who's like, can you believe what this, professor is doing, and violate some kind of morality clause? Some universities have those, you can't make the university look bad kind of stuff. Luckily, I got a job in the UK, which is generally chiller about this stuff, and it was never an issue. And then also, by the time, the reason I left my job as a faculty member in the UK was precisely because the band was popular. So by the time the band got really popular, I was out of academics. I did have one thing. This is the kind of thing that I was most scared of. I was giving a talk. This is at Rutgers, and it probably would have been in 2012 or so. I was going to give a talk about some research there to their high energy theory group. And there was a guy sitting in the back of the room when I walked in, and he looked a little nervous. And I was like, okay, what's this? Yeah, I mean, that's not unusual, by the way, for a theoretical physicist. So I just assumed it was a scientist at first, but he wasn't with everybody else. And I was like, is something going to go on here? And just as all the senior professors walk in the room, this guy stands up. He goes, I just want to say I really admire your work with NSP, and I think Ninja Sex Party is awesome. Thank you. And which I appreciate, of course, but also time and place, dude, So that was the kind of thing I didn't want to happen, where it became a distraction from, the others, because I was there to give a research talk, right? Yeah. And I would have been happy to talk to this guy anytime, but probably not 2 seconds before, a talk, just as the people I'm trying to impress are walking into the room. And then it leads to a conversation of, what is Ninja Sex Party, Brian? I'm like, oh, well, okay, I guess I have to talk about this.
Good old Rutgers.
Yeah. But
for Ninja Sex Party's most recent album before the acoustic one, which we'll talk about in a moment, Level Up, you revisited songs from your first 3 albums, Not Safe for Work, Strawberries and Cream, and Attitude City. How did re-recording songs differ from revisiting them at a live show? What was it like to actually reproduce the same song you did before?
Well, it's largely the same, right? Because some of the tracks we did for that album were things we had been performing live with Twerp for years. So a lot of that was exactly the same thing we do for a live show, which is like, okay, we wrote this, if it's from our first 3 albums, which where twerp wasn't involved, it's like, okay, how do we make this a twerpified song? So it was really exactly the same process as writing it for a live show. We thought a little bit about, do we want to put in as many solos as we do in a live show? But honestly, because our live shows are so comedy focused anyway, it was pretty much the same thing. So, if we recorded, like if you listen to, for example, our version of Unicorn Wizard on Level Up, that is like literally the version that we play live pretty much. And it's a bit different from the original version, which was just me doing all the instrumental tracks. But yeah, not a big difference between those two.
Yeah, I'm hope after all this ends that I can finally come see you live. The last time you were in Philly, you sold out one show. They opened a second one, and it sold out before I could even look at tickets. And I was like, holy shit! Yeah. I was just happy. There's like other people around me who love this stuff.
Oh, dude, believe me, we were so excited to do that, and that was the Electric Factory, which I think is now a different event. Yeah, exactly.
It's oh god.
Yeah,
it's,
I'll know it when you say it.
Philly Music Factory. I don't
Something
remember.
Like that, right?
Because they closed down the Electric Lounge, which is down the street as well, which I also loved.
That's a great club. A really great club.
Yeah, it's a very interesting venue. Like the inside is just cool.
Yep. Yeah, and they actually, what was awesome for that is because we were doing 2 consecutive nights, and our bus was parked in the lot there. Yeah. They just left the thing unlocked overnight, so we could just come in and use the bathroom and hang out. The kind of crew entrance. So we slept on the bus, and then we had access to the venue in the morning. The big thing when you're on tour, you may or may not know this, is you never know when you get to a venue, like, are you going to be able to get in? Because all you want to do is like take a shower, you can't shower on the bus. The bus is great, but it's very constricting. And just having a venue, we could like go and hang out and watch TV and have a zone that wasn't the bus to be in overnight was awesome. So yeah, they were really, really nice to us there.
So I've never thought about that aspect of touring. Well, I'm glad they treated you well.
Yeah, they were great.
So let me make sure. I want to make sure I say as many varies as I need to. The very, 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 very classy acoustic album. Yeah. So with that, what was it like recording an acoustic album versus like the produced stuff that you do otherwise?
Well, that was a weird one because it's really I think of it less as an acoustic album as a live album, right? Mm-hmm. Because we recorded a live show. We wanted to do some kind of show during the pandemic that we could put out because we couldn't tour. And so we recorded that show in order to show it as to put it out as a video, like a thing we could sell tickets for. And then it occurred to us after we got the audio and we mixed and mastered it. Obviously, we couldn't do too much because it was being taped. But it was like, well, look, we have an album. It's like literally an album-worthy thing of this show. And we walked in being like, oh, we'll see how we feel about it, knowing it was a possibility. But because we had the audio ready, it was like, well, we should release this as an album because why the hell not? It's like ready to rock. So we didn't approach it at all like a normal album. It was just like me and Dan, and then our producer Jim Roach played acoustic guitar and did some backing vocals too. We did it for the live show. And we rehearsed a few times and thought about the arrangement and stuff, but it's very, very far from what we were doing if we did an acoustic studio album, which would have a lot more bells and whistles and that sort of stuff.
With how like goofy and fun a lot of these songs are, was there a different level of like intimacy as you stripped down?
Well, for some, yeah. A few of those songs grew out of when Danny and I started, where they were performed with just the two of us. Like The Decision, we used to perform just piano and vocals. And so a couple of those songs were literally from the very early days of NSP. But the others, they're pretty. We did mostly originals, and then I think 2 or 3 covers too. The covers are very easy to do. acoustically because they're pretty straight ahead as they are.
Yeah.
But to me, doing the acoustic versions of NSP songs, because it's, especially Dinosaur Laser Fight, where we do like this very slow ballad version, to me, the comedy of that is that this song absolutely should not be done in this way. Like, I think it works well musically, but it's a stupid decision to make, to take this, wild song about dinosaurs having a laser battle in space and make it this slow kind of acoustic ballad, so if you see us perform live, we do pretty much that version of the song, like a ballad version of it. And yeah, so that to me, that enhances the comedy. Like we're taking a stupid thing very seriously. And I should say also the reason we did that is because we wanted to play Dinosaur Laser Fight live because it's one of our most popular songs. But the original version is the way we recorded it. It's very hard to sing live because we didn't write it to be performed live. And so, the breathing is hard for Danny to do and perform it in the way it was done originally, which is true about a lot of like songs from basically our first album is a lot of originals meant to be performed live because they were. Everything beyond that are real studio albums. And we didn't think at all about, hey, how can we perform this live? Because we weren't touring or whatever. At that point, I was kind of living in London. And then when it came time to tour to perform live, we were like, uh-oh, we can't actually do these because we didn't write them to be performed live. So in thinking of like, hey, how can we perform possibly our most popular song at that point, Dinosaur Laser Fight live? I remember I was like, well, what if we did a ballad we took it really seriously, just like really slowed it down, and we tried it and it worked.
So with a lot of things like that, like you're having to now think of things like, can we perform this live and things like that?
Yeah.
Has the creative process for Ninja Sex Party changed at all since the band started in 2009?
Yeah, it's completely different now. I mean, it's gone through several iterations. Like originally, Danny and I would get together and just write together and then trade a few files in the meantime. But we were living in basically the same place. Then when I moved to London, then it was all trading files back and forth. Then what started to happen is and this happened a little bit before because I was moving around in the States for academic jobs. I would write a lot of music and just send it to him and be like, pick the stuff you like. Like if you don't, what I have things I like, but you tell me what kind of tweaks your ear. And then he would, be like this one, this one, this one. And then we'd kind of work by just trading files. And then we kept working that way when I moved to England. When I moved to LA and we started working with Jim Roach, which happened right around the same time, maybe a year apart, we began what's now the modern phase of NSP songwriting, where Danny and Jim and I all get together and we write, all three of us in the same room. And that's the way we pretty much write everything now. And there's some work on it, of course, outside of that. But generally speaking, the writing is done. It's back to being in person now. Yeah. And it's, there's no right or wrong way to do it. Everyone has their own method. But it's just, I love writing in person because you can just get the vibe immediately. Yeah.
Yeah. And when you're writing in person, like lyrics can change. We did a musical a year ago.
Oh, cool.
And me and our sound guy we just sat there and just riffed back and forth and just wrote the whole thing.
Yep.
So do you find a lot of that, like a lot of improv, like when you're riffing together?
Oh, yeah. Tons for sure. Like there's kind of two different versions of the way lyrics happen. Sometimes Danny will be quiet for a very long time and just write stuff in his notebook as he's listening, and then throw out like a complete verse or two and be like, hey, what do you guys think about this? And then there's, usually it's pretty great. And then we punch it up. Or it's just throwing out lines, writing lyrics together, kind of riffing. And they're both great. And most songs have a combination of a few of them. Occasionally we just turn on a mic and, like this usually happens occasionally. I have like spoken parts in NSP songs. those are often just improv, where we'll just turn on a mic and there's a lot more that ends up on the cutting room floor, right? That's not just the first raw unfiltered take you're hearing, but a lot of those are just throwing a bunch of stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks.
So did you ever at one point think that you would be doing this for over 10 years?
Well, honestly, I had hoped, right? I think Danny and I both felt early on like this thing had legs and that there was something to NSP that was really fun and at least had potential. So, I told Dan early on, because we'd been working together for about 3 years before I had to move to England for an academic job. I told him, I said, look, here's my promise to you. If this gets to a point where we can make a living at it, I will quit my academic job. Like, and I meant it. I did it. But I couldn't, sorry. My point was I saw a future for it, which was very uncertain, but at least the possibility that there's something cool here that I think we can, keep doing for a long time. If you had asked me to put a number on it, I don't even know. I mean, how many bands, let alone comedy bands, last for, we're coming up on 13 years now. That's a really long time for any kind of band to be together and keep doing stuff. So I think this is already beyond what I could have hoped for. But I definitely saw a possible world, if an unlikely world, where this kept going for a really long time.
So you mentioned Ninja Brian being intentionally annoying.
Uh-huh.
Before I say this, I want to say I love the way you run all of the social medias you've run.
Oh, thank you very much.
Honestly, maybe one of the biggest influences on the jokes I make.
Thanks.
Yeah. How has intentionally annoying comedy impacted running things like the NSP socials?
Oh, it's intensely. It's I don't particularly care if we gain or lose followers, I'm happy to make the obscure reference that I like that nobody else understands, which, you can just see in replies. Everyone's like, what is that? To me, that is more precious than gold. I love it. There is, and I can track it. Occasionally I'll post something. I'm going to be like, oh, people are really going to hate this one. And then you see a few hundred people leave. I think that's fun, and I think that's true to the spirit. If I posted something where suddenly we lost 10,000 followers, I'd be worried. But if it's I'm very much of the spirit. If you can't hang with some mildly annoying stuff, you're not going to want to be here for the long term anyway. So this is not the account for you. It's certainly my style of comedy. So I don't try to actually antagonize people. But I do like to play with expectations of what is, to me, the NSP Twitter account is all about why would you tweet that? No, this, come on. Why would you just tweet the word ass? There's no, it's stupid. And if you genuinely think why would you tweet that? That's dumb. I don't want to follow that. Okay, great. You don't need to. This is not the thing for you. And it's not even a value judgment. It's that's what I think is funny. Yeah. So yeah. So mild antagonism is definitely a big part of my social media presence, at least as NSP, less so as myself. Yeah. I remember probably the worst thing that ever happened to that account is when they expanded to 280 characters, and I started doing the one emoji per line thing where you get the really long tweets. I had a bunch of those. We lost a lot of followers that day, but I was like, how could I not? Come on, if you're gonna give me 280 characters to do so I can print a fucking 3 pages of eggplant emojis, I'm going to do it.
I think what really makes the bit shine is how long they go on for.
Yes, absolutely.
I was so delighted when Y'all Want to Do Any Comes resurfaced. Because I love that.
Yeah,
It's so good.
Thank you. Here, you know what? I'll show you something. One moment. I haven't shown this to anybody. Hold on.
Uh-oh, here we go. I really love that neon sign. I might ask him
so
made.
good.
So I have a bunch of memorabilia on the walls here of my garage, including two hand-sewn. This was a gift from Jim Roach for Christmas last year.
That's incredible.
He paid some poor person to actually stitch this. And a fan gave this to us after a show. Right. So, yeah, the y'all want to do any comes. Here's my rules with that. So for everyone who doesn't know what we're talking about, which is probably most people, occasionally the NSP account, usually just on Twitter, because Danny asked me to stop doing it on Instagram, posts memes with the phrase, y'all want to do any comes, and nothing else. And so the idea is to use a meme in a completely stupid way, just with those words. That usually undercuts the point of the meme entirely. So my rules with that are, I'm never going to post them. And by the way, I break these rules all the time, but these are the general rules. Never post anything earlier than 11 p.m. So it has to be a late night thing, ideally so that people are getting notifications when they're asleep. And never post just one. It's always got to be 2 or 3 at a time. And so if I can't find 3 new memes to put those on, I generally won't post. And also, month or year-long gaps are great. So make people think it's gone away and then bring it back.
Yeah. So you've been, to go away from NSP for a bit, you've been working on a smooth jazz album. How does that differ from your other musical projects?
The biggest thing is it's just me doing all the writing. So, I haven't had a thing in a while, and I've certainly never put out an album, which is just written by me. So that's the big one for me personally, is like, I was just, I was the writer of everything. So that's being produced by Commander Meouch from Twerp. And so he's a big part of the voice of it too. And in fact, all the Twerp guys appear on the album in some form or another. But it's, it's like, it's not explicitly comedic, although it's a little bit comedic. We just have a few more bass parts to lay down, and then it's basically done. But it's a very different process to be kind of in charge of everything in a way that I'm not with NSP. I have a partner in the band that has different tastes than I do, and the stuff we come up with, we each have to like. With this, I don't care who else likes it. Like, it's just a thing. If I like it, that's good enough. And the other thing is it heavily features my saxophone playing, and it was scary. Like, I haven't done, an instrumental album with a sax. I'm a decent sax player, but I'm not like a shredder. And so when we went in to lay those tracks down, I was like, is this good? And actually, how good do I want it to be that good? Because I do have limitations as a player, if a legit jazz person heard it, they'd probably be like, what? No, it's not that great. But I think it works for the style. So it was fun to do something that was kind of a just me thing, and also intimidating because, it's putting yourself forward in a way that I don't usually do.
What influences have you drawn from for that album?
Oh, a lot. So I play mainly soprano sax on it. The soprano sax player, everyone's going to go to Kenny G immediately when you say soprano sax, which is definitely an influence. But the guy I really like, his name's Walter Beasley. He's a soprano player. I think he's a Berkeley College professor. And I love his albums. There's a lot of Grover Washington Jr., who's another, he's a sax player, plays a bunch of different saxes. He was a big influence. Let's see, who else? Spyro Gyra, for actually one song in particular. God, what else? Bob James was a big, big, big one. He's not quite smooth, but like, wouldn't even call him fusion. He's like a really influential jazz guy who wrote, for example, the theme from Taxi, if you've ever seen that show, is a Bob James piece. I love his music, and he has some really cool big band stuff. And I'm sure I could, go on and list stuff for ages, but those are the first ones that come to mind.
Has there ever been a moment where you've been surprised by the responses to the things you create and the communities that have formed around them?
Oh, I mean, I'm surprised that anyone has responded to anything and that there's any community, like when we started performing as NSP, it was like, we hope people would find it funny. But the fact that there is, now a pretty large group of people that, really like it and have found friends through it and have, as we hear, been inspired by it to make their own stuff, that was never a possibility I foresaw. Like it really kind of transcended two guys in a basement singing about dicks, sort of thing that we had originally. So the fact that there's any community around it at all is really amazing. And definitely, I hear a lot of creators say this. You start doing a thing and then you get a fan base, and then people are like, well, yeah, I really like, you got me through some hard times by making me laugh and stuff like that. And it's just incredibly touching and meaningful to think, wow, this thing that I thought was just being funny or, hey, just a silly idea, let's throw it out there, actually meant something to someone in a way beyond just being comedy. That's an amazing feeling.
So, have you found it difficult to shake off the Ninja Brian persona or the persona you had while you were on Game Grumps in order to be more yourself on the internet?
Yeah, a bit. What I found, and I think I've talked about this on the podcast, although I can't remember, is I think it's very funny to be kind of bombastic and arrogant, but not actually, it's like you're playing yourself up a little bit. So that's why I did the whole I have a PhD thing. And what I definitely didn't realize at the time is people would read that as me actually bragging about having a PhD, which I never meant to do. I was like, what idiot would constantly talk about how they have a PhD? Come on, that's literally only the biggest jerk in the world would do that. No one would do that. I do wish in retrospect I hadn't leaned into that quite so hard, because I think it ended up being kind of off-putting for people, which I also find funny. So maybe I do wish I leaned to it even harder. I don't know. But I think, I don't know what the difference is between me on Leighton Night and Game Reps. I guess I'm trying to make fewer jokes on the podcast rather than on Game Grumps, but I view it generally as the same person. Probably podcast me is a little more laid back than Game Grumps me, and I haven't really listened to them back to back. I don't listen to my old Game Grumps episodes, but I do I suspect. In fact, I know, because I see this in the comments or saw at the time, a bunch of people are like, "Who is this arrogant jerk?" That's something where and that definitely is part of the Ninja Brian persona. To get back to your original question, Ninja Brian sucks. That guy's a complete asshole, and definitely thinks he rules, and everyone else is just a total idiot. If I didn't foresee people being somewhat put off by that when it's verbalized, that's probably on me. On the other hand, a lot of the comedians I really love play bombastic buffoons, and I think it's the funniest thing in the world. So maybe that's just my comedic voice. I don't know.
I always thought it was great. I thought, yeah, that's hilarious.
Well, that's the thing is, I feel like if you were kind of on that wavelength, you would get it. I'm not being serious. I don't truly, I have no ego about that stuff. I just thought it was a funny thing to rub in people's faces when it clearly wasn't appropriate. So thank you. I'm glad you found it funny, because I know a bunch of people did take it in the spirit it was intended, but it's hard, especially when you come to a big fan base like that for the first time. You forget that some people just won't get it, and that's going to happen anytime you do comedy. It's just unavoidable, and it kind of is what it is. it still did throw me for a loop at first, where I was like, wow, some of these people really hate me. Yeah. Oh, well.
So I'm trying to decide what I want to do. Which question next? Okay. How does portraying Ninja Brian as part of a group differ from when you're doing him as a solo act, like in Ninja Brian's All-Star Variety Luau Spectacular?
Yeah, well, in one, I mean, the biggest thing is that if I'm solo, I have no one speaking for me. Like, the rules of that character doesn't speak ever. Like, it's hand gestures, text on, screens. That's it. So if I'm with Danny on stage, you have someone who can verbalize, right? And that's a big, big difference, because usually we know what we're each trying to communicate. Oh, and we trust each other. So if he's like, Ninja Brian's about to do this thing, I will go along with it, because that's, it's probably what I want to do anyway. Or I won't, or I'll just walk off the stage or whatever. Doing it by myself, and when I do Ninja Brian for that, it's like basically it's a comedy thing with PowerPoint slides. I love it. It's really fun. But I have to let the slides do the speaking for me and my hands rather than, another human.
So one more question before we do the final question. So your kids' band, Go Banana Go, how did the idea for that first form?
So we were in the studio, me and Jim Roach, our producer for NSP and Starbomb, just talking about stuff. So he's got kids, I got a kid, and we were talking about kids' music, and we were just like, we were just talking about kids' music, and it was like, dude, he had been thinking about doing a kids' thing. I'd been thinking about doing a kids' thing. And we just we're like, oh, let's do it together. And I had actually written a song called Pizza Feet for like a lo-fi rap project that I wanted to do with Aaron. And I brought the song to Aaron. Actually, I was like, hey, check out this song. This stupid thing I wrote about having pizza on your feet. And then Aaron and I talked about it for a little bit, but he was so swamped that he was like, look, I'd love to do something. I just don't have the bandwidth right now. And so I had this song, Pizza Feet, that I had written. And then we started the kids' music thing. And I was like, wait a minute. I basically wrote a kid's song already without intending it to be a kid's song. And so that was one of the first songs I brought to the table. And then we just kind of went from there. But if you listen to the original demo of Pizza Feet, I wrote it. It's like real lo-fi. I wrote it on a microKORG vocoder, and there's a lot of like feedback and that sort of stuff. So it's a very different. It's much slower. I think it's minor. It's a completely different song than the very poppy major key thing that ended up going on. And then, yeah, actually, Jim and I were just talking today. We'll have a new album coming out in probably a couple months. Oh, nice. So, yeah, writing kids' music's awesome. Half the ideas come from Audrey, my daughter, where she's just like, Daddy, would it be funny if you had a song about a dolphin that fell in love with a unicorn and they lived on the moon? I was like, yeah, that actually would be funny. Okay, go on, let's write it.
That's mine.
Yep. So she should get, actually Jim's kids too, like Audrey and his kids should get writing credits on like half the album, because a lot of it just comes from, making up silly songs together, which is honestly like one of the best parts about being a parent.
So final question. If you had a Rube Goldberg machine.
I figured this is where this was going to come in. Yeah.
If you had a Rube Goldberg machine, what would it do and how?
Let's see. What would it do? So does everyone listening to this know what a Rube Goldberg machine is?
I hope so at this point.
Okay.
We do it every interview.
I mean, I think this is not going to be an original answer. The best Rube Goldberg machine ever is the breakfast machine in Pee-wee's Big Adventure, hands down, right? Which just makes you an awesome breakfast with, bacon and eggs and toast and everything like that. I think every time I think of a Rube Goldberg machine, I want to wake up in the morning, push a button, have breakfast ready. And I think, the flying, with a skeleton dinosaur that drops the toast into the toaster, the Abraham Lincoln robot that breaks the egg, everything he has there. I wouldn't change a single bit of it. That's my ideal Rube Goldberg machine. And also a really great score to that scene by Danny Elfman.
Elfman just...
Right. That's the first. Yeah, that's the best.
Elfman scores are like so
Is that
good.
Burton's first?
Yeah.
Like big movie?
It's his first feature. Yeah, I think so.
Wild.
Yeah, he did that.
That's how you started.
He did that and then went straight to Beetlejuice.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like his run there in the mid to late 80s is like it's just incredible.
Up to like Ed
I should
Wood.
say probably into the up to Ed Wood. So
That's
it's
it.
not even the late 80s. It's like in the 90s. Yeah. There's a string of like 4 or 5 or whatever it is there that are just like can't miss.
And now.
Although personally, you know what? This is sacrilege. I never really liked Edward Scissorhands as much as everyone else did. People love that movie. It didn't hit me quite as much as Beetlejuice and Pee-wee.
Honestly, I only like it really because it was one of like the first 5 movies I ever watched.
Yeah.
I went like
It's a great film. It just like as a kid, I was like, I don't know about this one as much as the other ones.
It doesn't hit the same way.
Pee-wee's
as,
one that
like,
has stuck with me.
Beetlejuice.
Pee-wee, if you haven't seen Pee-wee recently, go back and watch it because I saw it. They had a 35th anniversary showing here in LA at the Wiltern, which is a big theater. And watching that on screen with like whatever, I don't know, several hundred other. This is right before COVID starts. It's like February 2020. It was like the best thing in the world to see that. So I saw that in the theater in '85 when I would have been 10, and of course terrified by Large Marge, like, all that. But watching it as an adult in the theater, the comedic performances in that movie are just astonishing. Paul Rubens he's just a genius, and it is like his performance in that movie is one of the greatest things I think that's ever been put on screen. It is just a marvel from start to finish.
Well, Brian, thank you so much for joining us. Where can people find all of your different projects you're doing?
I mean, if you just search for any of the names, you'll find them. Ninja Sex Party, Starbomb, Go Banana Go, Leighton Night with Brian Wecht. Like, just search for them, or just look at my Twitter, and which is at bwecht, BWECHT. They're all on there too.
You can find us at gatecrashers.fan or on Twitter at gatecrasherspod and all other platforms. Thank you. See you next week.
The Gatecrashers.